Welcome to the Modern Husbands Podcast, where any combination of Dr. Ross, Christian Sherrill, and Brian Page host national experts who share winning ideas to manage money and the home as a team. Today, we welcome Dr. Preston Cherry. Dr. Cherry holds a Ph.D. in personal financial planning. He is an accredited financial counselor, a certified financial therapist, and certified financial planner. In 21 and 22, he was recognized as one of Investopedia's 100 top financial advisors. Today, we will discuss how younger and middle-aged spouses can work together to build a dream marriage in retirement. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the show, Dr. Cherry. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're so excited to talk with you. So you recently got married. How have the first couple of months been? Talk a little bit about your marriage.
Sure. So I appreciate the question. So we got married. It's New Year 2024. We got married, Iman and I, in 2023, the summer. We've been together it'll be 7 years in this April. And so we were also geographically separated for 2 of the last 7 because my wife is from Saudi Arabia and we had to do all the visa stuff. And it took 2 years in order for us to get the fiance visa. And then we just recently received the permanent residence visa. So 2.5 years in total.
How was that separation period? How was that for you guys?
Yeah. So great question. The separation was hard. I would say that you hear these stories about people faking immigration. And I'm saying, listen, it's not worth the time or the money to fake it. Okay. This is one of the things where you don't fake it till you make it. You make it first. All right. And then you go through the process. You have to love somebody to go through that process. And another thing is, like, when you see on the movies and they fall in love, you visit these other countries and they're like, or maybe Paris or somewhere, and they're like, oh yes, we're in love and we're going to go back to New York and get married. It doesn't work like that.
Reality is not there.
Right. It don't work like that. But I also can say this, is that going through having built a foundation first. I mean, we met while we were doing our Ph.D.s together at Texas Tech in Texas. And we know each other. You know, we love each other. And even though it was difficult being apart, we talked every day through phone, and having that friendship, that love, that understanding, having all that communication beforehand helped immensely.
It's wonderful. I wonder too how much the period of separation sort of enforced and all the habits that y'all built during that time. I wonder how much that has carried over into your current life together.
It has. Thank you for the question, Christian. It has. If we didn't have the foundations of communication or an understanding, we had those face-to-face conversations during our time in Lubbock. And so without those, I call them necessary conversations. They're not difficult, because if they're difficult, they're labeled difficult, and you just won't have them, right? But they're necessary conversations and or levels of understanding. Yes, the subject matter can be sometimes challenging, but for me, and I'm pretty sure that you all, in your relationships can attest, is that generally, even of a challenging conversation, the outcome are so much better than having a challenging conversation, understanding, working with each other, listening to one another, and then that's better than not having it at all. And so when we had those discussions, we had that foundation again, now coming to fruition. Yes, we just got married, but we got a lot of work underneath the hood from those previous 6 years.
Well, when did she move here from Saudi Arabia?
This summer, so summer 2023. And so I would say that she spent the last 10 years going back and forth for schooling. So She did her MBA and all this other stuff.
I asked because I didn't realize that she's from Saudi Arabia. I didn't realize this background, and it's fascinating to me. And I promised to our listeners we will get to how to build your retirement together in marriage. But it does start with communication. It starts with understanding. And what I would love to know is, were there significant like cultural differences in terms of her relationship with money, and then the role of that she takes in a household and the role that you take in a household, and like, how did you work through some of those?
Yeah, so culture played a big part of us coming together, even from the beginning. So we had to learn about each other, and I think culture necessarily doesn't have to come from different countries or different faith
Sure.
beliefs. It can be just relationships with money. I mean, just own perceptions. This learning
Absolutely.
somebody else's perception about money and valuing that. What were their experiences about money, this, that, and the other. But to your question specifically, where you're talking about cultural, and ours were not only the human uh, aspects of culture, like I just mentioned, but going even a little bit deeper and adding on into those human elements, faith, uh, culture of folks in different countries, different regions, cultures just of familial, families. That can happen here, like I said, just within the states. I mean, but Dr. Ross is from living in Kentucky. That's different from California. You know, It-
Absolutely.
those two
Absolutely.
those two dynamics are different. So
Yeah.
now you end up when you're talking about cross hemisphere. That's also different. How do folks, when I go over to the Middle East and their culture, particularly Saudi, is how do they interact with one another? What do they value? Uh, there's not so much. There's a lot of entertainment in the Middle East for sure, but when you're sitting around the table, what I've noticed is there's more, eye to eye contact, more
Mm,
conversation, lack of
mm,
TV in the background. You're sitting at the table, history, elderly conversations are more respected. This, that, and the other. So,
Mm.
to your point, to not be more long-winded than I am, which is going through culture started from the beginning, and it really has shaped how we enter in our future conversations with money.
awesome. That's just fascinating. But getting into the finances, because I mean, obviously, Preston, you're a very accomplished financial expert. That's why we have you on, and are a big part of why we had you on here. So, getting into that, what are the most important financial lessons our listeners then can learn from you personally, from your expertise, your training, from working with clients? What are those financial lessons that they can learn in transitioning into marriage?
Oh, sure. So thank you for the kind words. First of all, I as far as
You
marriage
know I
is,
love you, Preston.
so you know what? Thank you, Bruce. You're the second person. My mother does too. So that's that. And I think Iman does.
You
So
got two. You got
I
two.
got two people. And Iman. But see, yeah, I know this is kind of cliche. I was watching a program once, and they say, "Why do you always speak in cliches?" And the guy said, "Because they work." You know, and I know we're beating the drum here about conversations, but those are the foundations. When I give advice to individuals, they say, "Okay, what does all this fluffy fluff stuff have to do with the money?" And I said, "Well, everything."
Mhm.
because right, stories, and we just kind of nailed them earlier. Stories, which are values, experiences, attitude, uh, your relationships with money, your aspirations. Which what have you been through? Trial, triumph, transformation. Okay, all of this is going to inform the dollars and cents with the C, of the money aspirations, and also life aspirations. So if we're not having dialogue, writing it down, dialogue with our spouse, dialogue with ourselves, internally and externally, about what life and human elements need to go into our money to help shape it, then we're not able to give our life and money assignments. I say if you have life and money alignment, then you give your money assignments. And so without that information, you do not have a financial plan, and surely not one you're not going to act on and stick with. Yeah. So that's where I would start.
That's a good segue into our next question too. So you spoke about one of the psychological obstacles that are standing in the way of couples saving and investing enough for retirement. And that is not having the communication, these values, conversations, and what some experts call money scripts, talking through those. What are some other obstacles in the path to couples investing for retirement?
Right. So this conversation that financial gurus and experts and all this other stuff like to have is this word enough. And and there's a lot of context to that. Whereas some folks will say, here's the advice, is where, yes, you for sure have to know what that number or what that lifestyle or what that aspiration is. It's never going to be enough. If it's never going to be enough to totally reduce, maybe worry, anxiety, wonder, all that. But it is necessary to have that conversation and say, what's the range? Not only dollar amount, but also just life. How do we want our aspirational life and money to be? Because there has to be, it is as far as retirement is concerned, it's retirement too. You're not stopping to be productive, by the way. It's kind of something else I like to say, which is people like, retirement, you stop working. No, you just be productive in a different way. You're retiring from and retiring to something.
I like that.
Yes.
I like that a lot, Preston.
So having something to retire to in a different paradigm is key. You just become more productive in a different way. I would say continuing is that when you have defined a continuum of enough, then you can start having a conversation on what enough is when you're actually in it. All right. You're like, okay, is this our time? Is this what I'm comfortable with? Do I have fulfillment, this, that, and the other? But I do strongly suggest not to discount the value of the dollar. I mean, I guess that's a pun going to time value money a little bit, but don't discount it, because wealth and well-being are two different things. And well-being is the enough categories in the well-being. Trust me, it has a dollar amount, and that's where the wealth is. So you do have to buy. It is a dollar amount. So I just to put all that together is that have the conversation about what your enough and your enough dollar and lifestyle amount aspires to be. So then when you approach it, then you can give yourself permission to transition into, that next state.
We all come from this sort of education world. And when you plan out a lesson for your students, it's much better to have a unit plan and a whole scope and sequence kind of ready to go for your full course, so you can work backwards from where you want to be, the range of outcomes that you're looking for at the end of the course. If you're working back from that, you're going to be a lot more successful in planning that individual lesson.
Absolutely. So you hit it on the head, Christian. So my dad, I just did a show with my pops, and him, my mother and my dad have been married for 46 years, and they had a plan about what they wanted to do as far as retiring from and going to. And it was around age 50, they said. But they had life is life. Lifes, and they had to delay that by 10 to 12 years because life happened, a whole bunch of other stuff. And to your point, Christian, at least they had a range. And then they said, okay, this is not so disappointing or shocking. We are on our definition of track, it's your version, it's people's version. That's what I want folks to understand too. It's their version of financial freedom, their version of aspiration, their version of adjustment, what they can do, right? And what he said was, it wasn't a shock. It was, a brief moment of disappointment a little bit. It's something that also to process your emotion at the time. Don't discount that, because life. So give yourself, time to process it. But then they were able to make adjustment and say, to your point, working backwards, at least they had some sort of, shape of what that life and money was. And then they were like, okay, let's make an adjustment. Let's work a little backwards so we can get to the forward. I love your analogy there.
As you're sharing this,
It sounds so simple, because in large part it is, right? Starting with the end in mind. What is your vision of enough? And I like that a lot more than kind of the standard advice of to retire you need 8 times your household income for your final year of work. Like that's a very common rule of thumb. Like, and just so for our listeners, that'll give you at least some rule of thumb. But some people want more. They didn't maybe travel when they were younger. Yeah, yeah. It really depends on what's enough for you, and that could mean more. That could mean less. And it's also important to recognize that when you have enough, that now your mindset has to change. And I've had to really push my father, who's financially free, into stop saving and to start spending. Because it's tough to break that saving habit after 78 years.
Absolutely, and you hit it right on the head, Brian. Is like that transition, not only just to retirement to something, giving yourself and your household to retire to something and live more free, like you said, financially free, life free. But the concept of that the transition itself, the before, during, and slightly after. Woo, that is a stage. Oh man, like you said, your father did that, and so many other people do it as well. That stage is so important because you're almost having to find yourself. You got to give yourself permission. You have to go through. You have to process, and then get used to what that new paradigm is. And to your point, they develop unhealthy relationships with spending very on. Whether it's learned out of a script or experience or practiced through habits and behaviors and decisions as their adulthood, and as those scripts carry through, or like you said, switching on a switch from saving to spending. So that's why I encourage folks to get a healthy relationship with spending very early. Also too, with having a healthy relationship with knowing that you do need a dollar amount. I know I can't say that enough, that people want to just say, oh yeah, I have a wealth of this and a wealth of that. I have a wealth of spirit. Well, you have well-being. You have if you want to be Mother Teresa, bless her heart, or, Martin Luther King, who died with pretty much no assets, you could do that all day and you have a wealth of everything. I mean, you have a well-being of everything, but you don't have wealth of dollars. So no, you don't need dollars in order to achieve some sort of well-being, but there is a trade-off. There is a trade-off. And when folks want to get, switch that switch on about spending is concerned, it's worthiness. It's, that struggle with enough. It's the uncertainty. But you can spend. And there's also a stigmatism on spending. Yeah. Unchecked and unbridled spending. Yes, that's bad. I mean, duh. Right? However, if you have the capacity, and everybody's capacity is different, to, within your plan, which is, live, you don't have to live below your means. You can live within your means. And means different than other people, pun intended there. So get healthy with spending early so you can, when in retirement, you're like, oh man, I'm used to the spending thing.
Well, I think this conversation about transitioning through different life stages and those kind of challenges associated with it kind of leads into my next question here. And so, like, what strategies or advice or considerations do you have that couples can use to work through some of these obstacles to invest enough for retirement?
Yeah. Well, we're talking about enough just by individual. So what I didn't want to preface by saying simply, but having the conversation to understand what the perception of enough is between, the couples, you're going to arrive at a household, number and lifestyle. So the process I suggest, and I'm sure other professionals and people are familiar with this process have said before, but I like to start off with, and I guess not necessarily, because I haven't seen this repeated a lot. I mean, it's out there, but first, it's establish a common goal first. Come to come to an agreement, and that is it kicks off the conversation, the planning with a little bit more positive footing, and you get the higher probability of harmony and less conflict if you say something like, our we want to retire at some point. We want to live well. We want to we want to we want to be together. We want to transition to our next life stage. So let's have a conversation about arriving at our dream aspiration, right? And so right there, you have set the table for harmony, because you're going to get to this goal that you both want to get to. Then you can also create a welcoming environment and say, okay, I'm going to share my perspective on how we could get there. And we looking forward to what you have to hear. So let's value each other's perspective. Yeah. And hear, not only hear it, but listen to it and value. And then we will try to understand better each other's perspective, and then contribute those inputs to our agreed upon plan that we have, in step number 1, right? So it gives the couple some breathing room to know going in that, yes, you have some agreement. Yes, I'm going to be understood and valued, right? Yes, it's a welcoming environment. And then we're going to come back around to using those inputs into what we agreed upon first anyway.
Hey there, podcast fam. We'd love to hear from you. Please take this moment to rate and subscribe to our podcast. Your feedback fuels our passion to bring you more engaging content. And please text this episode to your friends. It's your support that can help us grow. Now back to the show.
I forget who our guest was, but we had a guest, this was maybe a year back, who was sharing their insights into how to resolve, conflicts or have difficult conversations, necessary conversations, in your words, Dr. Cherry. And one of the tips was to sort of sit next to them rather than opposing them, like set up your body language specifically to have these productive, harmonious conversations where you're working through something and establishing goals together as a team rather than as, people who are throwing perspectives at one another. You're coming together harmoniously. So I wanted to.
Well, definitely, if I could throw in one more, it's either it was either Dr. Meg Lertz or who's our friend, who's the money attachment person, Bruce?
Ed Combs.
Ed Combs.
Oh my goodness, my bad, Ed. My bad, Ed. You my dude. But so it's either one of them or a combination of both.
Yep.
But yes, that doesn't mean that you're not going to have those minor conflicts within, differing opinions, different prospects. You may get into something within that conversation there and be like, what? I didn't grow up like that, or what do you mean? And then but also too, you said, okay, please continue sharing, because then it brings you back. It brings you back because, sorry, I interrupted. Please continue, because a nugget is going to come out of there that spouse 1 and 1A that you're going to hear and say, okay, that's going, we can use that for our plan. So it doesn't mean you're not going to have any, disagreement or, differing thoughts, but it does, when you have those, I even stop myself. It does, because I had somewhat of positive thought. It could be positive toxicity sometimes. But if you set up the framework and say, oh, okay, let me check myself before I judge or shame or discount or anything like that, like, hey, please continue, because that was a thought, because you set up in the first place that you do want to hear, now listen and understand and value that person's perspective.
Dr. Chair, I ran across a study that blew me away, man. It found that 1 in 4 married couples were investing enough in their retirement to each get the full company match, but they were missing out on free money, meaning one of them was contributing more than was needed for the company match, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But the other one was not contributing enough. And because they didn't talk about it. And that literally led to $700 a month, or sorry, $700 a year on average of free money, free matches, which over 30 years, earning the market average is like $200,000. So I hear that and I think, oh my gosh, there's so many people out there that never had a personal finance class. They don't know the basics of a 401k or a 403b, and that's harmful. So what are just a few like very simple things to us that unfortunately aren't simple to others because they were neglected or deprived of financial education in high school, that they should know about just basic retirement plans that can help them reach their retirement goals together in marriage?
Yeah, a lot of good stuff in there. So a couple of things, if I may, to talk about. One, the vernacular of basic. Nobody likes to be called basic,
Right?
So they're fundamentals. It's like 401k fundamentals, and that's just not wordplay just for sake. When everyone, or I wouldn't say everyone, you hear often that folks have a level of either shame or just not confident about their level of financial education or information.
Right.
All right. So what they're asking for is to be informed. They're asking to be educated. They want the information. People want that, and they want the fundamentals and beyond the fundamentals of what matches them. And I also say that the lack of financial knowledge, information, education, you can use them interchangeably or this, that, and the other, that it's not to a social economic status. We often say, okay, well, somebody was deprived of, and then we all immediately go to someone who is economically challenged for, maybe low income. All right. I could attest to serving high net worth individuals, ultra high net worth individuals that, a lot of folks are not grasping hold of the fundamentals, and also that information that's before, so or beyond.
Absolutely.
So those are two things I like to kick off there.
Absolutely.
Number three, I just could, it chaps my hide, and Bruce likes to know that I like to curse a little bit. So chaps my hide is the strongest we're going to get here for the family show. That
Thank you for reining it in, Preston.
right. That financial education, people want to be informed so they can make better informed decisions. So what about, couples and how do they talk about it? And just individuals, but couples in general? It is that may have fit them at the time, as far as one not contributing all to that second retirement plan or not. If you've had the discussion, then it's either part of the plan or it's not. Number three is to once you've had the conversation, to uncover what's going on. Well, was that purposeful, or not purposeful, but was it intentional? Was it intentional, or if it's not, then inform and educating both of yourselves and say, okay, if we do this, then we can get to our plan quicker, right? So what I'm saying is that if you had the conversation about retirement in particular, and you agreed that you wanted to retire 10 years with this lifestyle, blah, 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 right? And then you uncovered that, how come we're not contributing to the match in this second plan? Then it becomes not, shaming the other person or, being there, having them, they're uncovering basics or anything like that. You've now set the table for, oh, okay, we're missing out. Let's educate ourselves either with, good information from online or somewhere, or an advisor, and say, okay, what we're doing is not aligned with what we want to do. So let's get better alignment. And and now you can give your money assignment. Very much different from saying, why the heck are you not, contributed to all your 401k? Didn't you get the email, about the enrollment and the match and everything like that? Oh, and then, you all know that conversation is endless.
Yeah. Well, you could not have started sharing fundamentals in a more important way, because we hear from folks that when they argue about money, it's reactionary. Something happens, like they get a bill in the mail, they haven't had the conversation, they make assumptions, they don't show any grace, and then they become accusatory to their spouse. Like, why did you do this? Why did you do that? And that does not ever end well.
Oh man. And then it opens up a whole nother can of worms. And the famous line, while we're at it,
About those dishes.
you're right.
Do you see,
Oh man.
do you ever run into couples? So we're going to go through just some very, let's say a series of just fast facts, just for our listeners. Do you ever see couples who don't know yet, they're not informed that you can contribute to their 401k more than the company match?
Do I find that? I do find that it's just a lack of understanding about the match in general.
Yeah.
I will say that the terminology that we all know of is free money. Okay, let's reframe it just a tad bit and call it what it is, which is you're leaving your money on the table.
Yeah.
All right, because that's part of compensation. The match is part of compensation. So when the company says, okay, you know what, we're paying you compensation. What are we paying you? Well, that's vacation time, matches, salary, benefits, and all that. So if you tell somebody, you just left your money on the table.
That's such a great reframe there.
That is a brilliant reframe. And it's so true.
I'm going to go get my money.
You're just leaving your earnings on the table, like your money.
That's right. So just with that, they're like, oh, really? Oh, okay. Oh, tell me more. Right. Because now you're talking to them about their money that they left, not free money. It's their money. It's like, there's a difference. So now just knowing how matching works, and also not even just matching, is like, is it available?
Right.
Leading someone to their retirement portal, going through the options that they have. People either don't have time, or a combination of not having time, or I'm not going to understand. And that's somewhat of a limited belief, but that's also understandable because shoot, how long did it take us to figure all this stuff out, let alone, just families that are trying to go about their business. So there's a lot there. That's just opening the door in the right way for people to want to be informed.
I love it. And if there's one thing that you want listeners that's simple and actionable to walk away understanding from today's conversation, what would it be?
I call it the emotional HSA. So we got the
emotional HSA,
which is the honest self-audit. Honest self-audit. Be honest with yourself and start with admitting where you are, wherever you are in your life stage, your life and money stage. That's across the social economic stage. So admit where you are and what you want to do and what you don't want to do. And then acknowledge how you feel about it right now, your confidence level, your worry, your regret, all this. Acknowledge how you feel about it so you can process, and then you can take action. And that is the honest self-audit. It's your moment. And having that process can then help you kick off the second part of the A system, which is align, aspire, and achieve. Because now you're in a healthy state of mind and state of spirit to say, okay, now I'm ready to take action. And now how do we go about aligning our life and money, aspiring to do what we want to do, and then achieve it.
Brilliant. I don't think there's a better way to bring our conversation to a close. Dr. Cherry, thanks so much for your time today. Great conversation.
Thank y'all for having me. It's been great.
Thank you, Preston.
A special thanks to our guest and, of course, to all of our listeners. Don't forget to click subscribe wherever you download your podcast, give us a rating, and share the Modern Husbands podcast with others. Doing so goes a long way in growing our reach. And join your fellow Modern Husbands and have links to our podcasts, articles, and other resources to manage money in the home as a team sent to your inbox every 2 weeks by subscribing to our newsletter at modernhusbands.com. Until next time, be well.